on our previous lesson, we looked at the structures that forms the heart in order to understand the outward circulation. So basically, the outward circulation is made up of what? Two forms or two types of circulation that combines for us to get our outward circulation. So we have what? Pulmonary circulation, which is the first one, and the second one is what? Systemic circulation. Okay, so pulmonary circulation, then systemic circulation. Okay, it is these two combined to come and give us the outdoor circulation, and it is very, very simple. All that you have to do is to pay attention and look at the structures, how you move from structure 1 to structure 2, and how the circulation takes place. It's very, very simple. Okay, so now let's look at the first one, which is pulmonary circulation. So since we know the structures already, I think it will be easier for us now for us to understand it. So I've already made mention that the word pulmonary means what? Lung, or anything associated with the lung. All that the pulmonary circulation does is that it sends deoxygenated blood to the lungs. So basically, that is all that you have to understand. Pulmonary circulation sends all the deoxygenated blood to the lungs for it to be oxygenated. That is why we call it what? Pulmonary circulation. Okay. So now let's look at the details of pulmonary circulation. So under pulmonary circulation, we made mention that this big vein carries what? Deoxygenated blood from the upper portion of the body. So we call it what? The superior vena cava. Whilst this one carries what? Deoxygenated blood from the lower portion of the body. So we call it what? Inferior vena cava. So basically, in pulmonary circulation, you start by saying that in pulmonary circulation, the inferior vena cava carries deoxygenated blood and empties it into what? The right atrium. Then the superior vena cava also carries deoxygenated blood from the upper portion of the body and empties it into the same right atrium. So from here, you see that the two arrows are going into the right atrium. Then the right atrium contracts. When the right atrium contracts, the tricuspid valve does what? Opens up. Then when it opens up, the deoxygenated blood then passes through it into the right ventricle. Then the right ventricle will also contract. When the right ventricle contracts, then the blood passes through the pulmonary artery. Okay, there is a valve here known as pulmonic valve. So it opens up, then it passes through the pulmonary artery. The pulmonary artery. So basically, from the pulmonary artery, it goes into the lungs for it to be oxygenated. Okay, so when it gets to the lungs, the alveoli of the lungs, okay, there is exchange of what? Gas, where oxygen what? Enters into the blood, whilst carbon dioxide also moves out. Then you breathe your carbon dioxide out. So that is what ends your pulmonary circulation. So basically, you start your pulmonary circulation by saying that the inferior vena cava and the superior vena cava they all empty into where? The right atrium. Then you explain that the inferior vena cava carries deoxygenated blood from the lower portion of the body into the right atrium, whilst the superior vena cava carries deoxygenated blood from the upper portion of the body into the right atrium. Then the right atrium does what? It contracts. So when it contracts, what happens? The tricuspid valve opens up, then the blood gets into the right ventricle. The right ventricle also contracts. Then when the right ventricle contracts, the blood moves through the pulmonic valve into the pulmonary artery. Okay, so the pulmonary valve opens, then the blood passes through the pulmonary artery. Then it gets into where? The left side and the right side of the lungs. So at the left side and the right side of the lung, there is what? Gaseous exchange, where carbon dioxide moves out of the blood, then oxygen enters into it. Then the blood becomes oxygenated. So basically, that is all that you have to know about pulmonary circulation. Okay. Now let's look at systemic circulation. So systemic circulation is also very, very simple. The reason why we call it systemic is that it's sending oxygenated blood to all the systems. So under systemic circulation, all we have to know is that after the blood has been oxygenated, it passes through the pulmonary veins and enter into the left atrium. Then the left atrium will contract. When the left atrium contracts, the bicuspid valve opens, then it gets into the left ventricle. Then when the left ventricle contracts, the blood what passes through, or the oxygenated blood passes through the aorta, and the aorta supplies oxygenated blood to all parts of the body. So because the oxygenated blood is going to all the systems, then we call it what? Systemic what? Circulation. So after the cells have received oxygenated blood and they've utilized the oxygenated blood and the blood has become deoxygenated, it drains into where? Into the veins again. Then it passes through the inferior vena cava from the lower portion of the body, then superior vena cava from the upper portion of the body. Then the cycle does what? It continues again. So basically, that is all that you have to know about what? Alveolar circulation. Please subscribe, and if you have any questions you can ask or comment to make, you can make as well. Thank you very much.